Hello, I'm AJ Gary. I'm the director of the Arkansas Division of Emergency Management. Appreciate y'all listening to us today. I am here with Dennis Cavanaugh, who is over the National Weather Service. So, Dennis, welcome.
Yeah, thanks, AJ. It's always a pleasure to get a chance to talk with you. We have a great relationship with Adam, so I'm always happy to participate.
All right, fantastic. Well, for those that may be listening that don't know a whole lot about the National Weather Service, kind of tell us what your role is here in Arkansas.
Sure. So, the weather, most people think about weather, they think about that 7-day forecast. But in the National Weather Service, we actually have, our mission is one of public safety. It's not about getting tomorrow's high temperature exactly right. It's about providing people, Arkansans in this case, with the information they need to make responsible decisions if something dangerous is approaching them, how they can do something about it, how they can mitigate that hazard, ideally get themselves and their family to a place of safety or shelter. So our core mission at the National Weather Service is actually the protection of life and property. And so here in Arkansas, we're going to be leveraging weather information, taking all that forecast information and trying to repackage it in a way that makes sense to help people avoid or otherwise mitigate hazardous weather disasters that are unfortunately somewhat common here in the state.
So keeping that in mind, what are there some misconceptions on weather and alerting and things like that you hear quite a bit?
Yeah. There's lots of misconceptions about weather. A couple of them are, our forecasts essentially come from a forecast model. And so if you've ever been interested in meteorology as a kid growing up or something, it's not just a human out there guessing what the numbers are. It's us figuring out what the atmosphere is doing right now. So you can sort of think of it like a doctor's office. You show up to your doctor's office with symptoms, and then they use their expertise to figure out what's wrong. And that's kind of what we're doing with the atmosphere. It's how we treat the atmosphere. The atmosphere's symptoms are how we measure it every day. So the current temperature, the current air pressure, humidity, things like that, the winds, all of that goes into what is the atmosphere doing right now. We take all that data and we ship it off to Washington, D.C., to a supercomputer, and it's going to take all the information of what the atmosphere is doing right now, plug it into mathematical equations that we use to model the atmosphere, how the atmosphere is supposed to behave, and we solve all those equations for time. There's a set of 7 equations that are solved simultaneously. It's differential equations in linear algebra, super boring stuff, but the models take that and they try to solve for time to figure out, based on what the atmosphere is doing right now, what's the atmosphere going to do in 1 hour and in tomorrow and the next day and the day after that. Some of the misconceptions I think about weather forecasts, people think that if the forecast isn't perfect, it's wrong. And we get a lot of grief for the forecast being wrong. And sometimes the forecast is genuinely off base. Like we don't know a big thunderstorm's going to happen or something like that. But more often than not, it's where you're getting your weather information from. And so if you're trying to figure out this weather forecast by yourself and you look at one of those models, one of the outputs of those models, and think that that's going to be perfect every time, I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions. The model isn't trying to make it perfect. It's giving us one possible outcome for what the atmosphere might do in the future. And what you don't see is the one model is displayed publicly, but that one model is just one solution out of hundreds. Right. And so what we do is, instead of trying to figure out what's the perfect solution, we look at all of the hundreds of models and look at the way it's trending. And then at the National Weather Service, at least, we try to focus on, is any of that output, could it be dangerous for Arkansans anywhere in the next 7 days? So that, the weather forecast modeling, it is complex, but, looking for one solution, that's not what the models are designed for. They're designed to try to capture the breadth of solutions, and then it's up to the humans to distill that into, so what do we expect, or what's possible?
So what's the most likely thing out of all of those that's going to happen? And
right.
Of course, the important thing is making sure that the the public and other state agencies and your partners know about what the possibility that's coming so that they can start taking steps. So keeping that in mind, how do y'all do that? How do you coordinate with, other state agencies or county or local
Sure.
Jurisdictions?
Yeah, so you're right. That's what I just described was the real boring science aspect of that. But I said our mission was the protection of life and property, and that's true. The Weather Service has tried to do this on their own, historically speaking. Talking back in the 60s and 70s, the Weather Service started their mission by, okay, there's a bad storm coming. We're going to issue a severe thunderstorm warning, tornado warning, flash flood warning, whatever the case may be. And our job basically starts and ends with, okay, we see the bad thing on radar, we say warn, and we hit send, and that's it. We issue these warnings with the hopes that people are going to get the warning and do something about it and protect themselves. And what we found in the 60s and 70s, maybe even into the 80s, is that doing that in isolation doesn't work. It's a part of the process, but it's not the full process. And so what we've learned through social science and just through experience is that if we really want to give people information they need to, get out of the way of that weather hazard, we need to not just issue the warning. That's important, but we need to really work within those relationships that people already have. So with local police, local firefighters, volunteer firefighters, emergency managers, we found that our warning message is significantly better received, and it shows up in the data with less fatalities, less casualties, less injuries when we work with our important state partners like you at the Arkansas Division of Emergency Management, local county OEM directors, when we work with volunteer firefighters, ham radio operators. All these people are trusted voices in the local community. It leads to everybody around them, every source that they turn to, saying the same thing at the same time. And we have found out that holistic messaging is what actually saves lives. It's not just us saying, hey, this bad thing is coming, but, we work with broadcast media. So here in central Arkansas, if somebody hears of a bad storm, they turn on Channel 4. And if Channel 4 is saying, hey, take cover, they don't take cover. They go to Channel 7. What do they say? What about Channel 11? What about 16? They're going to shop around to see if is this real? Is everybody saying the same thing? And when everybody says the same thing at the same time, when it matters, that genuinely saves lives. And I've seen it in my about 10 years here in Arkansas. Our relationships with you, all of our core partners, are what saves lives. And so we'll always cherish those relationships.
Now, and Dennis, that's some great points. And you said you're 10 years. I've been in this position for, I think, right at 9, maybe a little over 9. One of the great things, one of the great pieces of our partnership is that, you notify us as soon as you know that there's a severe weather system moving into our state. And then we kind of take that, we start doing coordination calls with our other state agencies, our county, city officials. I know there's been times we've had over 200 people on those calls. And during those coordination calls, you're able to brief out to all of them in the state. And then we can better prepare at the state and the local level, prepare ourselves for what may be coming, worst case scenario, and then we're ready for that. The local officials are ready to respond and ready to take care of our citizens. So I just want to tell you, I appreciate that partnership that we've had with you, and I agree those things are absolutely have saved lives here in Arkansas. So I appreciate that. You mentioned earlier warnings to the public. So I'd kind of like to talk about that because that's a big topic right now in the news.
Oh, yeah.
Flooding incidents and things, how the public can be made aware of this. So if we could, what are some ways that Arkansans can get those warnings?
Yeah. So, getting the information that something bad is headed your way is super important. Very few weather events happen without any notice nowadays. our technology has advanced far enough that we catch most of those major weather events before they happen. But we still get a lot of people that say, well, we had no warning. And that can be true if you don't have a way to get warnings. And so that's what you're bringing up is a super important point here. It is, we can't force a warning into anybody's living room. So it's up to the individual to have multiple ways to receive hazardous weather information or just hazardous information in society in general. One of the easiest ways to get weather warnings is on your cell phone. So there is a program, there's a lot of people, a lot of hands in that program, but wireless emergency alerts is one of the primary ways you can get warnings on your cell phone. That's going to give you all tornado warnings and the worst severe thunderstorm warnings and the worst category of flash flood warnings. Okay. But it's important to note that it won't give you all severe thunderstorm warnings or all flash flood warnings, because I guess folks have given feedback to the WEA or the wireless emergency alerts folks that getting all the warnings is too much for most people, that it's so many warnings that it annoys them. And if it annoys them and they turn it off, it's off forever. Until you go into the settings and turn it back on, you won't know you're getting those alerts. So cell phones are great, but if you ever got annoyed and turned them off, that's it, they're off. So if you're going to use your phone to get weather alerts, I always recommend downloading a good weather app. The Central Arkansas TV stations, I think most of them have a free weather app you can download to get all your warnings that way. Also Red Cross, FEMA have apps that can give you warnings. Just look for something to give you all the weather warnings to make sure you get them, not just the wireless emergency alerts. And then, what if the cell phone tower gets knocked down or your cell service just gets cut out or something like that happens? Well, we do have weather radios. It's a super old technology. And most people have gotten rid of them in exchange for their cell phones and stuff. But the weather radios operate on a completely different band of operation from your cell phone. So it's still radio waves, your cell phone and the weather radio, but they're different broadcasting systems. So the cell towers go down, the weather radio tower is probably still up, and vice versa. So having both is good. And while weather radios, if you've ever turned them on, they're awful. They're dry, they're really boring. It's just the same repeated message every 3 and 4 minutes. It is awful. You don't listen to it for entertainment, but we consider weather radios smoke alarms for tornadoes. Right. And so just like the smoke alarms in your house, you don't listen to it for fun, right? At least not at my house. So you don't listen to those things for fun. They're just there to let you know if smoke is in your house. You want to know, you want to be woken up. Same thing with weather radio. It's not there for fun. It just lets you know if a dangerous storm is nearby. It lets you know about it. Even at 2 a.m, it'll wake you up. If you are awake and paying attention, you can turn on the local TV stations. All of the Central Arkansas TV markets, good relationships with all of them here. They are competitive with one another, but when hazardous weather is facing Arkansans, at least in this state, they tend to put all that aside, put the competition aside, and focus on here's the severe weather, here's what you have to do to stay safe. So they're another great resource. And some counties, going into the emergency management side of things, Office of Emergency Management directors for counties in Arkansas often look for ways to get citizens alerts that are apart from the other services I've described. And so, you can always visit your Office of Emergency Management website to see what those options are in your county. But Code Red or other reverse 911 systems are another way to get weather alerts, either a phone call or a text. So just have multiple ways to get alerts, because that's the most important thing. Any one system can and has failed, but if you have at least two, it goes a long way into building resilience.
Yeah, good points. And, it really gets down to that personal responsibility. And the alerts are great to let people know that, hey, there is severe weather or there's danger in your vicinity, to alert people to, hey, start digging a little bit deeper, see how close it is to their house maybe, and what action to immediately take to help save lives.
Oh, absolutely. And I think what you said is really important there. You take what we're talking about and you look and figure out, how does this matter for me? What do I have to do? And that's important. Getting that warning can start that process. So the faster you start that process, the faster it leads you to taking action, hopefully.
All right, good deal. So what are some of the other biggest challenges that you face in keeping Arkansans weather aware and safe? Is there anything else we missed?
Yeah, I think for us in our operations in the Weather Service, the biggest obstacle for us doing our job well is getting reports. Honestly, it's hearing about what's happening in those local communities. The radar is great. It can tell us what the winds are doing aloft. It can tell us if there's hail aloft. It can tell us if there's going to be heavy rain over the same area for a long period of time. But it doesn't tell us, the radar is always giving us information of what's happening in the sky. It never tells us what's happening on the ground. And a lot of times, once you get away from the most densely populated areas, we just don't know. And we don't know for hours on end. And so it's a challenge when we have storms over semi-rural parts of Arkansas. Imagine, we're just like you at Adam, we're a 24/7 operation. So, you imagine a forecaster being there at 1 a.m, just sitting there sending warnings, seeing stuff on radar, sending warnings, and you do this 3 or 4 warnings in a row, and you've got no reports of hail, damaging wind, tornado, anything. You start to second guess yourself. You really start to wonder, am I issuing warnings and there's nothing actually happening? Or, do I believe what I see on radar and just, trust that the reports are going to come? And legitimately, if you go a long period of time without reports, the psychology of that is it convinces our forecasters that nothing's happening, so they stop issuing warnings. Right. And that can be really dangerous, especially overnight, because we don't want to issue so many, if there's nothing happening, we want to stop issuing warnings. We don't want the cry wolf effect to take effect. But, by that same notion, if things are happening but we're not hearing about it, that leads to a dangerous situation where we think nothing's happening, so we stop issuing warnings, and then we find out that hours later there was a continuous path of destruction. So if we can get those reports near real time, that helps us do a much better job issuing warnings consistently and keeping the continuity of those warnings as it moves across the state.
So I think it's a great place as we kind of wrap this up, but it goes back to that partnership that we talked about earlier, and it's both ways. It's pushing information out, and it's getting that information back in, so we know what steps to take next. So, Dennis, as always, we appreciate the work you do with the National Weather Service. To our listeners out there, severe weather starts coming into the state. Make sure you have your phone set that you can get those alerts. Make sure that you're weather aware. You're paying attention to what's going on, whether you're in your home or you're out in the great nature that we have in our state. So, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, AJ. It's always a pleasure, and we're always welcome to talk.